Hi there, I'm back with the second half of Chapter 27, The Undead Cemetery. Mom! Conner gasped. Emmerich, Bree said. They ran toward the sounds, praying nothing had happened to either of them. A dark and foggy graveyard was scary by itself, but knowing a dangerous man was lurking nearby with a gun made Conner and Bree feel like they were in a real-life horror movie. They jumped at every statue they saw, afraid that it was the masked man looming through the fog. Luckily, they ran into Charlotte first. Mom, Conner said, thank goodness you're okay. Where's Emmerich? Charlotte's eyes darted around the cemetery. He was right beside me a moment ago, she said. We escaped from your uncle, but got separated in the fog. Another scream echoed through the cemetery, but this time it was coming from Goldilocks. Mom, you have to go and help her, Conner said. Bree and I will find Emmerich. From the look in her eyes, Conner knew leaving him and Bree alone was the last thing his mother wanted to do. We'll be fine, Conner said. Right now, Goldilocks needs you. Charlotte was torn between her obligations as a mother and her duties as a nurse. But she had to remind herself she wasn't the mother of a normal child. She knew Conner was more than capable of taking care of himself. He had proven it time and time again. I love you, sweetheart, Charlotte said. Be safe. She hugged her son and kissed him on the cheek. Then Charlotte followed Goldilocks' moans to the front of the graveyard and prepared to deliver the child. Conner and Bree hurried in the opposite direction looking for their friend. Emmerich, Bree whispered, where are you? They found Emmerich crouching behind a tombstone. He was trembling and looking around with large, frightened eyes. The fog was the thickest in this part of the cemetery, and he hadn't been able to tell who Bree and Conner were until they were a few feet away from him. There you are, Bree said. Conner, Bree, Emmerich cried with relief. Where's Charlotte? She went back to help Goldilocks, Conner said. Come on, we've got to get you out of here. Not so fast, a voice shouted behind them. Conner and Bree slowly turned around and saw the masked man creeping toward them. He was in the worst shape of his life. His limp was much worse now that he had a sprained ankle and a bullet wound in the same leg. His clothes were covered in blood, and the sedative had made the bags under his eyes droopier than usual. He was fighting the medication off with all his remaining strength. The boy is coming with me, the masked man yelled. Conner stood between his uncle and Emmerich. No one is going anywhere with you, he said. Stupid boy, the masked man said. Get out of my way or I'll shoot. Go ahead, Conner said. You'll never be satisfied no matter how many people you kill and no matter how powerful you become. And if I can't stop you, my sister will. Good luck facing her when she finds out you killed me. The masked man ignored Conner and pointed the gun at his nephew's head. Give my regards to your father. Just as he was about to press his finger against the trigger, they were all startled by a loud, scraping noise. The lids of 3 stone caskets nearby were pushed open, and the corpses inside suddenly stood up from their graves. What's going on? Conner whispered to Bree. She glanced down at her watch. It's midnight, she said. All the bodies in the cemetery come back to life for a few minutes every night to stretch their legs and visit with each other. It's supposed to be a morbid representation of what break time is like at a public high school. All 3 corpses were women, and although in Bree's story they were less decomposed than they would have been in real life, each had obviously been dead for a long while. Their skin was so pale it was a shade of blue. There were dark circles under their eyes, and parts of their bones stuck out from their skin. The women wore very specific clothing from different eras in history. The first woman wore early 15th century armor, and her skin was partially burned. The second woman wore a dress with wide sleeves, a necklace with the letter B, and a headband with a long veil. The third woman wore an enormous ball gown with lots of jewelry, and it had a towering white wig. The 2 women in dresses also had stitches around their neck, as if their heads had been detached from their bodies and then been sewn back on. Who are they? Conner asked. Why do they look so familiar? This area of the cemetery is called Wronged Women Row, Bree said. These are the women I thought had the most unfair deaths in history. That's Joan of Arc, Anne Boleyn, and Marie Antoinette. The historical figures stretched and yawned as they came back to life. It was like they were waking from a long nap rather than coming back from the dead. I just adore the nightly stretches, Joan of Arc said. Don't you, Anne? It certainly gives us something to live for, Anne Boleyn giggled. You know what I always say, Marie Antoinette said. Death is what you make of it. Just like everything else, it's all about the execution. The corpses laughed wildly among themselves. Apparently nothing tickled them more than jokes about their mortality. The woman turned to the 4th casket in their row, whose occupant hadn't risen yet. Looks like Beau is sleeping in again, Joan of Arc said. She'd better wake up and stretch, otherwise she'll be very stiff tomorrow, Anne Boleyn said. Oh, Beau, darling, Marie Antoinette called into the casket. It's midnight, dear. Come out and join us. The lid of the casket slid open and a fourth corpse stood from her grave. She wore a dainty dress and a bonnet and held a staff. She must have had been the most recently departed because she was far less decomposed than the other corpses were. "Sorry, girls, I was counting sheep," the woman said. "It helps me pass the time between stretches." "What's your count up to now?" Joan of Arc asked. 28,974,863, the woman said. Conner recognized the woman immediately. It caught him completely off guard because he thought he'd never see her again, even in a fictional story. "That's Bo Peep," Conner whispered to Bree. "You put her in the cemetery of the undead?" "This must be my second draft," Bree said. "I was upset about how Bo Peep died, so I added her to the story." As strange as it was to see their deceased acquaintance, it was nothing compared to how Emmerich felt at the sight of his birth mother. He had hundreds of questions he wanted to ask, but he was too afraid to speak. Seeing her corpse come to life made the masked man feel like he had stepped into a nightmare. He couldn't tell if she was really there or if she was just a hallucination brought on by the sedative. "Bo Peep?" he asked in shock. All the undead women turned at the sound of his voice, and for the first time they realized their row had visitors. Bo Peep was enraged to see him. "Lloyd!" she yelled. The other corpses gasped. "Is this the man you were telling us about, Bo?" Joan of Arc asked. "Yes, he is," Bo Peep said. "He's the one who used me, who tricked me, and who broke my heart. He's the whole reason I'm in this cemetery. I'd still be alive if it weren't for him." "And look, he's not alone," Anne Boleyn pointed out. "There are 3 young people with him." "I know them too," Bo Peep said. "What are the 3 of you doing with a man like him?" "I promise it's not by choice," Conner said. "He's holding us hostage." Hearing this angered Bo Peep to no end. She stepped out of her casket and charged toward the masked man. He had never been so terrified in his entire life. He aimed his revolver at her, but it didn't stop her from approaching him. "Don't come any closer or I'll shoot," he warned her. "You can't hurt me anymore," Bo Peep said. She reached toward him but with her cold, dead hands, and the masked man shot at her, using the 3rd and final bullet in the revolver. Bo Peep looked down at the bullet hole in her torso, but it only infuriated her even more. "Kill me once, shame on you. Kill me twice, shame on me," she said. "Get away," the masked man said. "I'm warning you." "Your threats are as empty as your soul," Bo Peep said. The masked man hobbled away from her as quickly as his injured leg would allow. He was paying attention to where he was going, though, or wasn't paying attention to where he was going, though, and fell right into an empty grave of an unmarked tombstone. He tried to climb out of it, but dozens of decaying hands suddenly stuck up from the dirt below and grabbed hold of him. They pulled his legs and his arms and his clothes and pulled them into the ground with them. "Unhand me at once, you demons!" the masked man yelled. He screamed and tried to free himself, but there was too many for him to fight. The more he struggled, the more hands appeared. Even after he was completely underground, his screaming could be heard from above ground, but the sound of his voice became fainter and fainter as he was pulled deeper and deeper into the earth. When the noise finally disappeared completely and engraving appeared on the tombstone, "Here lies Lloyd Bailey, beloved by none." As much as Conner hated the masked man, it was still a terrifying thing to witness. He wondered if his uncle was really gone for good, but when he turned to Bree, he saw her look just as frazzled as he did. Bree's story of the undead had taken on a life of its own. "Well, that's all the excitement I can handle for the night," Joan of Arc said. "Time to go back to sleep," Anne Boleyn said with a yawn. "See you tomorrow night, girls," Marie Antoinette said. "Same time, same place, for all eternity." The women lay back down in their graves. They pulled the lids over their caskets, tucking themselves in for a good night's rest. Bo Peep wandered back to her casket, but Bree stopped her before she stepped inside of it. "Bo," Bree said, "I'm not sure if this is the right thing to do, but if I were you, I would want to know. It's so difficult to say. I guess I'll just spit it out. Emmerich is your son." Bo Peep stared at the young boy in bewilderment. If she had a pulse, it would have been racing. If she still needed to breathe, she would have been breathless. "You're my son?" she asked. "Yes," Emmerich said. "Hagatha said she would find you a good home. Did she?" "She did," he said. "I have a mother and an adopted mother who loves me very much." "That's good to hear," Bo Peep said, knowing that I might finally be able to rest instead of counting sheep. Emmerich eyed Lloyd's grave. "Is my father coming back?" he asked. "Not from where he's going," Bo Peep said. "He'll never harm you or anyone else ever again." Bo Peep removed a small necklace from around her neck and placed it in her son's hand. Bree and Emmerich remembered her showing it to them while they traveled down the secret path with the royals the year before. It had a thin chain and a small stone heart with a crack across it. "Here, something to remember me by," Bo Peep said. You seem like a kind child. I'm sorry I didn't raise you myself, but you were better off with your adopted mother. I was too young and foolish to be a mother. You didn't deserve to inherit my mistakes." "I understand," he said. "Good night, Emmerich," she said. "I hope we see each other in our dreams." Bo Peep lay back down in her casket and pulled the lid over her body. Bree put her arm around Emmerich as he watched her go. Once she was gone, he looked on the necklace and held it tightly in his hand. "Speaking of mothers," Conner said, "we should probably find my mom and the others." Conner, Bree, and Emmerich hurried to the front of the cemetery to regroup with their friends. The closer they got, the louder and clearer the other voices became. "Push, Goldilocks," they heard Charlotte shout. "Push, push, push!" "Urgh!" Goldilocks grunted. "You can do it, Goldie," Jack encouraged his wife. "You're almost there." "I can see the head," Charlotte declared. "Just one more push." "Oh my gosh, what is that?" Red screamed loudest of all. "I'm never having children." Soon the sounds of a crying infant echoed through the cemetery. By the time Conner, Bree, and Emmerich found the others, Goldilocks and Jack were the proud parents of a healthy and beautiful baby boy. There wasn't a dry eye in the bunch. Charlotte cleaned the baby off and wrapped him in a towel she had found in the ambulance. He had his mother's golden curls, his father's strong chin, and his Aunt Red's doe-eyed expression. "Jack, we're parents," Goldilocks said tearfully. "We have a son." "We're an official family," Jack said affectionately. "We did it," Red said and burst into happy tears. "I only wish Charlie was here to see it." Although she had nothing to do with creating the child, she hugged Jack and Goldilocks as if she were a new parent too. "What are we going to name him?" Conner asked. "Hero," Goldilocks said confidently. "That way it won't matter where he's from, what he becomes, or who his parents are. He'll always be the hero of his own story." And that is the end of the 27th chapter. The next chapter is called A Situation. I'll see you guys then.